Good morning, and thank you for joining us here today. My job today is to convince you that the LG G2 is the most exciting smartphone on the planet. And that means I have a very easy job. Simply put, the G2 makes it all possible. Whatever you want to do on a smartphone, whether it's taking pictures, staying connected at work, listening to music, organizing your life, or keeping in touch with friends and family, or even my personal favorite, if it stays in this room, watching 12 hours of the Hoff on Baywatch. There are many things that make the G2 great, but today I'm going to stick with the top 5 breakthroughs. It's the design, display, camera, sound, and user experience. So let's dig in. Design. Smartphones have come a long way since they were first introduced. They've gotten more powerful and bigger. However, in most cases, users' hands haven't grown that much. Do you know what these numbers represent behind me? 2.4 inches was the width of the smartphone when it was first introduced. 6 years later, smartphones have gotten bigger in size, and manufacturers have begun making premium smartphones at 2.7 inches. And if size alone isn't causing people to drop their phones, then maybe it's the buttons. Most smartphones have buttons on the sides and on the top, and you're supposed to push them with the very same fingers that you're using to hold on to the phone in the first place. For too long, we've been blaming our fingers for smartphone drops that are simply not their fault. We figured there had to be a better way. LG observed thousands of users, and it turns out that most people naturally hold the phone this way because it's the most comfortable, most stable way to hold the smartphone. So we decided if your finger is so eager to hang out on the back of the phone, then let's give it something to do while it's there. So we listened, and we learned from you. As you heard Dr. J.S. Park say, we put the power and the volume buttons right on the back of the G2. It sounds so simple, and it's a big design enhancement. And it's the first of our 5 breakthroughs that we're going to talk through. Now, I'm sure at least some of you have figured out that by putting the button on the back, it presents a challenge. The battery. If you have something going on the back of the phone, you're going to either need to increase the size of the chassis or reduce the size of the battery. And I don't know about you, but I certainly don't want that thicker bulk. And we know consumers don't want to reduce the operating time by making the battery smaller. So LG's engineers beat the battery challenge with a design that qualifies as a breakthrough in its own right. The solution involved increasing the battery's density and incorporating a step design to reduce dead space. The result is a battery that provides more, that's right, actually more usage time, and still allows us to use the rear key. So what does this rear key give us besides a more comfortable and more stable grip? Well, for one thing, the rear key means you can find the volume control without looking at the phone. And this works whether you're right-handed or left-handed. The rear key is right where your index finger goes. Just like knocking on the door of a friend's house, G2 wakes up with a couple of taps of your hand. Knock it again, and it turns off. The volume control also doubles as a means to launch G2's quick memo function and camera. So now, taking a selfie on the center stage in Lincoln Center got a whole lot easier. And no need to worry about smudges on the camera lens because we used an anti-fingerprint sapphire crystal lens that is 3 times stronger than tempered glass. With all the important controls now living on the back of the phone, the front and the sides of the G2 are buttonless zones that are free for the display. Said another way, the rear key is the only, let me say that again, the rear key is the only physical button on this device. The G2 is sleek and stylish. Its look is one of a kind. The rear key makes the G2 more comfortable, functional, convenient, and beautiful. It's a great idea, and really, it's your idea. We learned it from you. So, 2.7 inches. We know from looking at how people use their smartphones that it's the width of the phones most people are carrying. So if 2.7 inches is the most common width, what is the largest possible screen you could get on a phone? I guess theoretically, it could be as big as a football field, but that's not very portable. The G2's display screen is 5.2 inches, and those 0.2 of an inch are a big deal. And here's why. Smartphones have to serve two masters, our eyes and our hands. We've learned from you that if your eyes were calling the shots, they'd make a display that's as big as possible. But your hand also wants what we were just talking about, comfort. Size versus comfort. This is what smartphone makers have always been up against. And then there's another wrinkle in the assignment. In the last few years, while phones were getting bigger, another change was taking place. People started using their phones longer. And the longer you look at a screen, the more eye fatigue you may experience. And in essence, the screen seems smaller. So again, we listened and we learned from you. We studied the way people use their phones and realized that we had to get as much display out of our phones as possible, while still keeping the phone comfortable in your hand. We found the answer in an LG innovation called dual routing. Now, we're going to get a little technical, so get ready to start typing. On the display, the touch sensors cross like tiles, and once a person touches the display, the touch sensors send a signal through the connector to the chipset, and that fires up the application that the user just activated. The touch sensor on existing products only allows for a single connector, and this requires a thicker bezel around the phone. We gave the G2 a touch sensor that uses two connectors. That's right, more is better in this case, and this allows for a significant reduction in the size of the bezel. We've put that extra space to productive use. The result is a G2 with a width of 2.7 inches, a brilliant 5.2-inch display, and an ultra-thin bezel at 1/10 of an inch. It's all screen. The answer to your next question is yes. That 2/10 of an inch makes an important difference. And you'll have a chance to see that for yourself in our experience zone after the presentation. And now I'm going to continue bragging about the display, because there is more. The display of the full HD G2 also uses graphic RAM, and that is another first of its kind. It allows us to reduce the display's energy by up to 26% on a still frame, and increase usage time by about 10%. And I can hear what you're thinking. None of this matters at all if the picture isn't very good. Well, here's the thing. When most people look to purchase a smartphone, they judge according to PPI, or pixels per inch. But the number that they really should be looking at is subpixels. And as you can see here, both are full HD displays, but the difference is huge, and the picture looks fantastic. So the first of our breakthroughs was an intuitive design, and that lets your hands and fingers do what they really want to do. And the second is G2's 5.2-inch full HD IPS display, and that provides an amazing picture without sacrificing anything in the comfort department. So let's switch gears to capturing images. Let's imagine that you're riding in a car and you're looking out the window. Actually, let me clarify. Imagine you're riding in a car as a passenger and you're looking out the window. The car is moving down the road, swaying and bumping all over. But what we're looking at with our eyes they don't move like that. Our eyes stay focused because they're constantly making micro adjustments, and they help keep the image clear. The G2's camera does that as well. The G2's optical image stabilizer, or OIS for short, allows the camera to take crystal clear images even in a moving car. Now, there are other smartphones out there with OIS technology, but until now, OIS has mostly been available on 4 megapixel or 8 megapixel smartphone cameras. The G2 makes OIS technology available for the first time on a 13 megapixel smartphone camera without any boxy bumps or unsightly lens housings, and it'll help maintain its slim, sleek design. Now, not only can you take clear, non-blurry pictures from a moving car, but you can take crisp, perfectly lit pictures at night. The problem with capturing quality images in low light is that you need a longer exposure time. But for every millisecond that the shutter is open, your hand can shake. And if your hand shakes, what happens? You blur the image. Better than me talking about the G2's camera, you need to try it out for yourself. So be sure to take it for a test drive in the demonstration area after the presentation. In the meantime, Amy from our demonstration zone is here to tell you a little more about the G2's amazing camera.
Thanks, James. Good morning, everybody. My name is Amy, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the G2 camera. It's a 13 megapixel camera with the breakthrough OIS technology. So what I want to show you today is the LG G2 with some of our competitor phones so you can see how they compare. Now we have the G2 here with OIS technology and our competitors that don't have OIS technology. So you'll notice on the G2, when I turn the machine on that will vibrate the devices, you'll be able to see even when we zoom in up to 4 times on all 3 of the displays, the image on the G2 is very sharp and it's still very smooth, and you're able to take fantastic pictures with the G2 because of the OIS technology. So I'd like you to take a moment after the presentation, stop by, and put our camera to the test yourself. Thanks, everybody.
Wow, look at how good that picture looked on the G2. Thank you, Amy. We'll see you in a little bit. So, breakthrough number 3. The G2 is the only smartphone with a 13 megapixel camera without the extra bulk to have an OIS function truly inspired by the operation of the human eye. So you might be thinking, is it time to responsibly recycle your old digital camera? That's for you to decide, but I do know that for me, when I'm on vacation next week, the G2 will be the only device I take with me to take pictures. So let's talk about sound. What you see here behind me is a graph of the best frequency band of an original sound. The blue line represents a frequency at 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz sound. This is the range we normally hear on a CD. Many of us are under the impression that CD sound is perfect. But as you can see here, and more importantly, as you can hear, there's a lot missing from it. Humans can hear a lot more than CDs deliver. The red line is the graphic representation of sound recorded in a professional studio at 24-bit 192 kilohertz. If you could listen to this perfect recording under ideal conditions, you'd hear not only the music, but also the musician breathing, the sound of the fingers touching the piano keys, and the piano's stops and actions. Everything. Today, we carry a lot more than music on our phones. Entertainment of all kinds has migrated to the phone. And that means not just music, but game audio, movie soundtracks, and more are living on our smartphones. And as people are starting to get more visual entertainment out of their phones, we've learned from you that they're starting to demand more from their audio as well. Some smartphone manufacturers have tried to embed the hi-fi technology into the smartphone. Unfortunately, it's no simple task. At LG, with our innovative audio technology, we were able to rise to the challenge. The G2 produces sound quality at 24-bit 192 kilohertz